Okay, welcome back to our special simulcast podcast interview we're going to have for the Florida Football Insiders podcast, as well as the Powers on Sports podcast. We've got a great pleasure to talk to the new voice of the Florida Gators, Mr. Sean Kelley. Sean has been the lead play-by-play guy for ESPN college football on ESPN radio. He's done a lot of work over the years in New Orleans with the Pelicans, Tulane over the years, and is a very, very accomplished broadcaster and is a great addition to the University of Florida athletic department and community. Welcome in, Sean.
Jason, thanks. When you rattle all that stuff off, I feel less accomplished and more old than anything else these days.
Yeah, well, all right. First question. Selling Gainesville, moving from New Orleans, which is a big city, big metropolitan city, all the big sports, to now relocating to Gainesville, Florida, where it's kind of all University of Florida all the time. How was that transition for you and your family?
It's been great. 20 years for me in Louisiana. My kids grew up there. They're making their lives over in Baton Rouge at this time. So it was a big chapter in my family's, course here, and a very abrupt change to go to Gainesville, Florida. I had never been to Gainesville, which was strange. I had Florida on a number of different occasions in basketball and football, more football than anything else. But strangely, I'd never been to Gainesville or the Swamp. And if you'd asked me even 6 months ago, hey, Sean, is your career probably going to end up and wind up in Gainesville? Probably I would have laughed a little bit. But it was just one of those things where all the boxes got checked. It just was going to be a tremendous fit, and it's turned out to be that way here through the first 4 months.
What was the allure of the job? I mean, one thing, you think about it in the broadcasting where people don't realize the broadcasting world is a lot of free. If you don't have a full-time gig with a company, it's a lot of freelance stuff, events here and there with different companies. Was the allure of knowing kind of you're going to have a set schedule in the fall, kind of a set schedule in the winter, and then have a little bit of flexibility to do some other stuff? Was that something that drew you to a job like this?
Yeah, a little bit, maybe more in the fact that I got to a point in my career, and I've been very, very blessed, to say the least. And things were going very well at ESPN. I got a lot of questions like, well, why do you want to leave ESPN? I said, well, I don't. I was in the midst of negotiating my next contract with ESPN. Things were great. I loved getting back to doing multiple sports again, as I was doing the last 3 years full-time with Mickey Mouse there. And in this sense, there were a couple of things in play. One was that I missed a little bit being a part of a team, sharing in that journey with whether it be an NBA team or, in this case, a college team as it was early in my career. It was funny when I was at ESPN, I enjoyed like going in, doing a game, and then see you later, really no emotional investment.
Right.
And look, when you do now what I'm doing for a particular entity, you're emotionally invested. So the wins feel great. The losses are tough, but at the end of the day, you're a part of something. You wear the colors. You're tracking these young people's lives athletically, and sometimes off the field or court too. Throughout the course of not just a season, but maybe even a very special time in their lives. And so I missed that in a lot of ways. So there was that. And then because I've been as blessed as I have, I guess I got to be a little bit choosy about what would be next.
Yep.
And Florida is an iconic brand in college football, basketball. And we're talking about a very short list, I think, that would achieve that kind of a label. So I would put that there. And then, of course, everything else has to make sense. The finances have to make sense. Wife has to be on board with this.
Sure.
You have to think about, hey, look, and I always think about this with any job I take. Will I be happy there in 10 to 20 years? And that seems ridiculous. And probably most people who are life coaches would think that that's not healthy. But I don't look at jobs as I'm going to go there for the next thing, or this is a short-term deal. I always go into these things thinking long-term. And I love the long-term prospect of being at Florida. And the last thing was the people. I did my homework on Scott Strickland and Billy Napier coming in, Todd Golden,
right?
What this baseball program is here, and really across the board, the entire athletic program. This place wins
They do.
a lot. And while it doesn't seem like that here recently in football, track is coming off of a first sweep ever of the men and the women national championship. Volleyball is competing for a championship. Swimming and diving has Olympians crawling all over the place. I mean, it's a special, special place, and a fan base too that is as passionate as any in the country. So sure enough, I tried to put as many boxes out there to be checked, and they just kept checking boxes. And then the last bonus piece there was the fact that ESPN wanted to keep me in some way if I did decide to take the Florida job. They were super supportive. And when they came around and said, hey, look, we understand this and it makes a lot of sense. If you can you stick around in maybe a smaller way?
Yeah.
And when they offered that and Florida said, we think that's a good thing too, then, spiritually, financially, emotionally, all of it made sense.
Yeah, it gives you the ultimate flexibility to kind of do what you want to do and not be committed to being on the road, the NBA circuit where you're on a road trip for 10 straight days and you're not at home. You're going to be home every couple of days, even if it's on a road trip with Florida or an ESPN gig, you're going to be back in a couple of days.
Yeah, and again, all of these jobs, as have their pluses and minuses. So, if you're just doing the NBA schedule, yes, during the NBA season, it is an absolute grind. But because it covers this certain chunk of the year, you have the off season. My kids love the off season. So there's always a trade-off. And I don't think any of us should be complaining about being in this position if you get it, because
Sure.
This is what you dreamed of doing. If you didn't love this, you'd be crazy to do it. So if you get the chance to do it, then you're just trying to figure it out as far as that schedule goes and just managing a non-traditional type of job.
So you're in an interesting position coming into Florida when you did. New football coach, new basketball coach, and you all in the same kind of cycle here in the offseason. How has that been? Obviously, you're replacing a very fond, very long tenured legend in Florida, Mick Hubert, who's been the voice for the Gators for 30 years. How you having to earn that trust of the Florida community and the Gainesville and the Florida fan base all around the world of Sean's now the new voice, and obviously you have your own style of calling games. How has that worked with you and you jumping into that role, replacing such a legend?
Yeah, I'll start with the Napier Golden thing first. You brought up the fact that I'm coming in as the new guy along with those two. And look, that wasn't, a major decider for me, but certainly an intriguing one in that I enjoy process. I get in on the ground floor with both of their programs,
Sure.
Get to watch those guys build, if you will, and be with them day one, work to what they would like to have our process be, broadcaster coach, as opposed to, trying to wedge into what somebody else had already been doing. Now, the Mick thing, we're talking about a legend here. We're talking about a guy who was in this chair for 33 years and adored by their fan base, rightfully so.
Did you know Mick before that?
I did not know Mick before. I knew of Mick.
Yeah. Right.
Obviously since we've talked several times and whatnot, because we're half of the four members of this club since 1940. So
wow.
He carried the bulk of it for 33 years. And I got a lot of, you've got big shoes to fill and whatnot. And do I have a signature phrase? Mick had, oh my, and put that on a t-shirt and everything else. I'm not a signature phrase kind of guy. As far as the big shoes to fill, clearly, but I felt like maybe more so at this time in my career than any other that I could follow somebody like that and be okay. You mentioned a very key thing, the trust with the fan base. Mick earns that trust over 3 decades of work, shares in championships with them, shares in heartbreak too. So I am in pursuit of that trust. I won't be Mick Hubert in any way. If a fan, wants to reminisce about the 04 Florida football team, I probably can't help you on that. But every day moving forward, we'll have that shared experience. So I guess my end of the deal is this: I will give you everything I've got, and I will be as orange and blue as you might imagine, and we'll go from there. And I think that over time it will take care of itself.
And the cool thing about being in a place like Gainesville, as opposed to maybe New Orleans, when you're at the Publix at Gainesville, they're going to know who you are. Where if you're in New Orleans, you're at a movie theater, people might know the voice, but they may not recognize that you're the voice. Whereas in Gainesville, they're going to know who Sean Kelley is at the grocery store, at church, at whatever thing you're doing.
Yeah, especially in Gainesville, and then it's becoming that way across the state a little bit too.
Yep.
Just read a study. There's over 3 million Florida fans in the state of Florida.
Oh yeah.
So it's more. Sometimes it's weird in that when you live in Gainesville, schools here in Gainesville, you only kind of think as Gainesville as your universe, and with Florida, it's a much bigger situation with that. We're also talking about nearing now 500,000 living alumni. So. As I said earlier, it's a national brand for sure.
Sure.
It was interesting whether it was in the NBA or maybe more so in my years at ESPN. You're kind of nationally known, right? That doesn't make you famous or identifiable. I still had some measure of anonymity going on.
Sure.
So now I think in some ways I'm nationally known through my ESPN work, and I'm locally famous now here in Gainesville because of the Florida Gators.
And now with all the different broadcasting technology, people all over the world are listening to Florida Gator games every single night. Every basketball, football, baseball, whatever. You guys have those outlets where they can listen to that stuff. Where when Mick started, that wasn't available.
No, it wasn't. And this is an interesting point or thing that you bring up here, is that when I was getting ready to decide upon this job, I had to kind of figure out what the voice of the Gators would be here in 2022. In the sense that when Mick started his run here in Gainesville, or when I was starting my career, around the same time, radio was a much more upfront medium than it is now. Everybody can kind of get the game basically on this now, or they can check scores through social media and everything else. My son is 22 years old. So the challenge for me, I think, here in this next phase of the job, is how do I be the voice of the Gators, not just in the traditional sense, which I'll do, but how do I be the voice of the Gators to that 22-year-old like my son, who's maybe not consuming the game in the traditional sense on radio? And so in what ways can I serve that part of the demographic too?
Absolutely. All right. So you grew up in St. Louis. Obviously, St. Louis has a very rich pedigree when it comes to sports broadcasters. Costas, Buck, Joe Buck, Jack Buck, and many more. Was that kind of your influence of wanting to get into this industry and kind of on a full-time basis?
Yeah, I think there's two things here. One, we all get to this place in our lives athletically that we realize that we're not playing much beyond where we are. Right. For me, obviously, high school and maybe, a chance to play a little baseball beyond that. But other than that, my desire was to work in sports in some way, because I certainly wasn't going to play it. I didn't really have the appetite for coaching, and I was, I guess, romanced by these broadcasters you mentioned. And it was not only the quality of the broadcaster, Jack Buck, Bob Starr, Dan Kelley, I'm just thinking of people like that growing up, but also their connection to the community. St. Louis is a big time baseball town. When I was growing up, it was a football town too at the time. Yep. Hockey certainly was on the landscape, but these broadcasters weren't just the voices of their teams, but they were also ambassadors for the team and pillars of the community. And I would see that, and I desired to have something like that. And so when I went off to college, the original goal was to kind of like follow my new mentor in college, which is Mike Reese at Southern Illinois University, Mike Kelley at the University of Missouri, also an SIU guy. So maybe I could be the voice of a school. That was the first that was the goal. I achieved that by going to Tulane, and let's just see what goes on from there. The NBA thing was a massive curveball. And so my career took me down that path, and I was in the league for almost 15 years. But here I am back at being the voice of a school. But again, all these things go back to St. Louis, as you mentioned, and wanting to be more than just the guy who calls the games on the radio. And I feel like that's going to happen here a little bit at Florida.
So as a broadcaster, you want to try to tell the story of what's going on in front of you and all that, and be as descriptive as you can. How different is it being at a university where you're the voice of a school, having to provide a little bit of homerism in your commentary versus when you're working ESPN doing a Knicks Celtics game where you don't really have an affiliation to a team? How do you balance that interest of trying to tell the story the way it is, but also having a little bit of, I won't say homer is not the right word, but you know what I'm saying, as far as a little bit of slant towards the Gator Nation.
Yeah, I think that when people turn on a Gator broadcast now, they know it's a Florida Gators broadcast. We're concentrating on telling the story of the Florida Gators. We're pulling for the Gators.
Right.
I'm not the homer in the sense that every call is against Florida,
right.
Or no other opponent should be respected in any way. No, it's for Florida Gators fans, but at the same time, it's maybe not as. I will be excited and we'll punch the big plays, especially on the Florida side, but I'm not going to, be careful here. Don't give a game 7 call to a 3rd down conversion in the second quarter. It's just not the same. Thankfully I've had experience with both now, and on the national side, yes, it's your objective. You're kind of straight down the middle. I kind of want to describe it more as I'm excited for the big things for both teams.
Right.
Let's celebrate what's special in these sports for both sides equally when I'm doing an ESPN radio game. Sure. And on the Florida side, I'm certainly not going to be super excited about a Florida State touchdown on Friday night. But I probably will give you a bit of a different call if the Gators score on Friday night.
All right, let's get to on the field. The Gators are coming into the wrapping up the year 6-5. Coach Napier's first year, clearly kind of an up and down. They've had some really good moments, and they've had some other moments where they've struggled a little bit as far as consistency and such. Where do you see Coach Napier? He's got a great pedigree recruiting wise. How do you see his phase in year 1 of building this program back to where it is a national brand and where they are contending for SEC titles?
Yeah, wins and losses. I would say now after last weekend, they're probably one game off of what I thought it would be. I thought they'd be sitting at 7 wins right now, heading for Florida State, and I thought that 8-4 would be really, really pretty good for Billy Napier in his first season with the talent that he inherited, and you'd be bowl eligible. I felt like getting those extra bowl practices would be a huge thing for this team in its first season. The loss last week at Vanderbilt, stunning, obviously, for Gator fans, surprising for others, observers of college football.
Right.
And so, that's why I think it's one win off the pace. Having watched Coach Napier a little bit, somewhat from afar, but not too far in Louisiana the last several years.
Right. Coach
Napier and his staff have a very good track record of developing players once they get into the program. For instance, at Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns aren't getting four stars and 5 stars. It's just It's not going to happen. So Napier and company take 2s and 3s, and by the time they're done with them, if we reevaluated, maybe they would be a 4 or a 5, or would be able to play at the next level. Right. So he had to do some of that here at Florida, and I think he has. There are several players, especially in that freshman sophomore group, that have shown tremendous growth since he took over the program. And then, it's instilling the environment that he wants and the work ethic that he wants here, and then making use of what was already, on the shelf that was left by the prior staff. So in that ways, I think he's checked a lot of those boxes. The recruiting will play itself out here shortly. I'm not a huge follower of recruiting. I have a hard time believing some. And then, other things, is it enough information that I can say, oh, he's going to have a top 8 class. I don't know. And I don't know who to trust really on that. From all reports, I guess what I can gather is it sounds pretty good. We'll find out here, in the coming months. So if he can recruit and have this team better than it was, obviously when he walked in the door, that's progress. And I think that he is not patient with this process, even though he will tell you that, Rome wasn't built in a day, or the house isn't built, the day you turn on the light switch, all those things. And neither is this fan base too. So I think if I'm going to, prognosticate for you, maybe that's what you're asking me to do. I think he gets this back to a national power faster than you might think. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because to me, I think more and more, and even in college football, you have to be able to coach them up when you get them on campus. A lot of good players out there at all these different programs. It's how well can you and your staff coach them up when you get them there. That's what's made Nick Saban. I mean, sure, Nick Saban has great players, but he coaches those great players to be extraordinary players, kind of deal. And that, to me, that's the difference in college. You see it in the NFL too. Guys like Belichick, they don't normally have the best players in the league, but they're year in, year out have the best teams because they coach them up and they develop a great culture.
Yeah, it's a system. It really is. There's a formula to all this. And some guys are better at that formula than others. And not only do you have to coach them up when they get here and develop them, you got to keep them too. I mean,
Right.
that's the other thing in play right now with college football. And look, that's a two-edged sword. Keep them, yes, but we've seen other programs, and Florida will probably do some of this themselves, and has already started with a couple of guys that he brought with them from Louisiana. Right. But you can jumpstart this or do something with that transfer portal in a positive way as well.
Correct. No, correct. Absolutely. And with all the NIL money that's out there, every university has their own program or operation of how they generate those dollars. And you're right. You can turn it around quick. All right. So you're going into your first Florida State matchup over the weekend. The Gators beat the Seminoles on the basketball court last week. Just talk about from your perspective, just of a big rivalry game. How do you it's obviously you're just calling a game. I get it, but there's always a little extra juice in a rivalry game, whether it's Florida, Georgia, Florida State. Just how your excitement level when you're in a big game situation as a broadcaster.
It's high. I mean, I don't know how you can't get amped up for this. In a lot of ways, these rivalry games only reside now in college sports. We've lost so many good rivalries in pro sports. Division realignment, free agency, all those things. I mean, yes, Cubs, Cardinals is still special. Yes, right. Yankees, Red Sox, still special. There's a couple in hockey that still ring the bell a little bit, but that's really it. So, this resides in college football, college basketball, college athletics, and there's a juice to it, and there's an unpredictability about it. And sometimes it's like in the case this week of Michigan, Ohio State. Yep. It's an elimination game.
Yes.
Both are undefeated. It has massive implications to not just the Big Ten, but the national championship picture as well. But, otherwise, it's a bragging rights game. B, it's a chance to ruin something for the other team. And we see that probably more often than not in college athletics. There's the team that's kind of on a roll, and maybe you haven't had the best year, but boy, wouldn't it be nice to make sure that they don't as well. So all those things play into it. And then, of course, you have the proximity in this situation. You have families that have Seminoles in the family and Gators in the family. And you have these kids that played together perhaps or against each other in high school.
Sure.
All those things play into it, not to mention, obviously, pageantry, tradition of when this game is played, time of year and whatnot. And even in this situation here, not even in the same conference, but yet nobody seems to that doesn't seem to matter. Even though off the field, there was this talk over the summer with all the conference shakeup, hey, would Florida State go to the SEC?
Right.
Oh, well, Florida will never let them, or, just stuff like that. Barrett Jones, my former ESPN radio football partner, he played at Alabama and whatnot.
I know
he had a great phrase. He would always say, bring me all the petty. And I'm on board with that. Give me all the petty here in a rivalry game and in college athletics, because it's just fun.
All right, last thing, I'll get you out of here. So back in your Louisiana days, I saw that you got your fireman's certificate and you did some fireman's work in Louisiana, helping as a volunteer at one of the parishes. Is the Gainesville Fire Department hiring, looking for some volunteer help?
I would be more than happy to help them in any non-firefighting role. I'm getting a little too old to go running into buildings like that or get an alarm at 1:30 a.m. It was a really strange thing that developed. I when I was doing just the NBA stuff, I had that massive off season. And I was looking for some. I can't help myself. I always have some on the side. But I started as a volunteer. You do you do this much training to be a volunteer, and then I loved it. And there was a need for me as kind of a flex person with my schedule.
Yeah.
So I just kept training, and eventually I got, fully certified and became a paid firefighter, and enjoyed doing that for, I don't know, 5, 6 years, I guess it was, until my ESPN career started to take off in conjunction with my NBA. And it's simple math. Like, in order to stay as a paid firefighter, you have to complete X number of hours of training every year. And it was getting out of balance,
right?
In that I was training more than hours worked, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And we knew the chief and I had worked up this grand concoction. We knew that eventually it would get out of balance.
Right.
And I eventually, said, "Hey, I think we've reached the out of balance point." And so I kind of had to let it go. I miss it.
It's a cool thing, though. It's a cool thing.
Yeah, no, it's a very
cool thing on your resume.
Yes. I think that at the time I don't think there was any other NBA broadcaster / firefighters running around. So party of one, I guess.
I got you. Well, Sean, it's been a real pleasure, man. I really appreciate the time. Keep up the great work in year one in Gainesville. Welcome to the Gator Nation, and have a great broadcast during the remainder of the football season. And obviously, you're into the you're diving into basketball right now as well, and continued success, man. You do your job very well, and keep up the great work.
Jason, you're very kind. Thanks for having me. Happy Thanksgiving to those who hear this before or around the holiday. And otherwise, I'll look forward to our next time together.
Appreciate it, Sean. Have a great weekend. Take care.
Thanks, you too.